He's the hyphenate from MLB Network, Fox Sports, Sports Illustrated. He is Tom Verducci. How are you, Thomas?
I am well. I was digging your conversation about Ron Shelton.
Yes.
I got to tell you a quick story, a couple of them. Ron Shelton, as you know, he played in the Orioles minor league system.
Yep.
And when he's going through all these stops in the minor league system, he's hearing all these stories about this crazy pitcher who threw harder than anybody who ever lived. Steve Dalkowski was in the Orioles system. Had no idea where the ball was going, but was throwing, people thought at the time, like 103, 104 miles an hour. That was the basis of Duke LaLoosh.
Is that right? No kidding.
Yeah. And we just lost Steve Dalkowski just a couple months ago, a victim of the coronavirus. He was in a nursing home, I think, in Connecticut.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And another bit of trivia for you. That was filmed, obviously, in Durham at the old ballpark there, of course, the winter. The manager of the Durham Bulls that season was Brian Snitker, now the manager of the Braves. And when they needed a catcher's mitt for Costner in the movie, they borrowed Snitker's catcher's mitt.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
That is great. Well, Tom, you were overhearing our conversation that we have during the NBCSN commercial breaks on our YouTube feed about our poll question. You want to go ahead and let's just have a little bit of fun before we get to the nuts and bolts of baseball basically inflaming themselves. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so Tom, it's the 32nd anniversary of Bull Durham's release. What's the best baseball movie? Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, The Natural, Major League.
Yeah, that's a great four you got there. I would go with Bull Durham because it just rings so true. It's hilarious. It's well acted, but, as a baseball aficionado myself, I love the fact that the dialogue is just spot on. And again, it's because Ron Shelton lived it, spoke the language. Love all the other ones, too. Natural, I thought the cinematography was just probably the best of the baseball movies. But soup to nuts, I'd go with Bull Durham.
Would you say, because again, Tom, I know you're not on Twitter, but Twitter only allows us 4. Would you kick one out, add another? Do you think we got the right 4? Read it off to him one more time so he understands which of the 4 here, Chris.
Yeah, so Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, The Natural, or Major League. Twitter only allows for 4 options, so those are the 4.
You think we got the right ones here?
Yeah, I think you do. You're going to get a lot of pushback on people who love The Sandlot, which, how do you not love The Sandlot as well? But it's kind of a different type of baseball movie. So, I like those 4.
So basically what Tom's saying, Chris, is that those who wanted The Sandlot, we're Smalls and we're killing them, is basically what he's saying.
You're so proud of yourself for having seen it finally.
Yes. Everybody. Okay, Tom, let's get into it here. I guess we're now baseball, I guess we the fans are, baseball is Smalls, and we're telling them that they're killing us, man. So what is happening as you and I are conversing here on this Monday morning where the Players Association told baseball, tell us the when and where, and tell us today. Let's end this thing.
Yeah, what's happening is huge disagreement that's gone on now for I don't know how many months. I guess since March. They can't even agree on what they agreed on in March. It comes down to this. The players basically said we took a quote-unquote pay cut in March so that we would be paid 100% based on games played. So say half a season, we get half of our salary. Owners are saying, well, listen, man, we didn't know at the time, and we left open the possibility that we could be playing these games without anybody in the stands, and that's 40% of our revenue. And we'll have a conversation later about what to do with empty ballparks. And the players basically said no backseas, like the schoolyard game, and you can't go back to that. Listen, they're so wedded to this idea. In some ways, Rich, it's very impressive that the players have really found a collective, strong voice on this issue. It's not about pension or an economic system or free agent compensation. It's very understandable. It's about a cut in your salary across the board, right? So that's galvanized them. So they've held to their position firmly that they will not take what they call a second pay cut. And driving this whole thing kind of like, part of that March agreement, the players agreed that if they couldn't come to an agreement, the commissioner could say, all right, here's our season. We're going to play X number of games. It's going to start on this date and end on this date. They agreed to that. And based on everything we've heard, that's why the commissioner told me last week on MLB Network, we're going to have a season this year. We're going to have a season. and under their parameters, season ends on September 27th, last game of the World Series no later than November 1st, they'll only get in about 48 games in the regular season. So that's where we're headed. Listen, it won't be the end of it because the players could still file a grievance. The owners could actually file a grievance too, but it looks like we're getting to the point where the commissioner does respond to the union by saying, okay, here's how many games we're playing. I think it's going to be 48 starting August 3rd, and we go from there.
Starting August 3rd. So they're just going to wow.
Well, I said that because I'm backdating it, Rich, that, the owners have September 27th as the end of their regular season, so they get the whole postseason in before November 1st. So if you backdate 48 games from September 27th, that's where you get. And I actually think if that's what you're going to do, why have just a 3-week training camp then? Start to get players in camp next week. This way, you'll have pitchers more stretched out and players will be more physically prepared for a season if you give them 4 weeks instead of 3 weeks.
So, and then in the middle of all this, we hear that Turner Sports and, or AT&T or whoever you want to call as a parent company, is going to plug $1 billion into the pipeline with a new television contract. Tom, how does all of this square that baseball won't, take the financial hit as owners for this one shortened season, or not come up with some sort of way to say, okay, players, you get less of what we agreed to in March, but you still are made whole later on down the road when we've just made all this money. Money's being put into the pipeline regardless of what happens here. How come we can't do it? There's enough smart people and business folk out there to figure this out. What's going on?
Yeah, it reminds me of somebody told me this years ago, that the greatest thing to happen to baseball, and you could apply this actually to any sport, is the DVR. So once people started time shifting their television viewing, then you just zap through the commercials. And the only way you watch commercials now is if you're watching live TV. And sports is just an incredible resource for live TV. Nobody wants to watch a game that's been tape delayed. You already know what the score is. Where's the fun in that? So, baseball has tremendous number of games, which TV sees as quote-unquote content. So it's a great content generator, live content. Advertisers love it. So especially in a postseason where baseball becomes more event-oriented, there's a premium. The networks love it. So I think that has a lot to do about the state of television as much as it does about baseball specifically. But, yeah, it's an indication that the sport, as far as the finances go, I think is healthy. And it's, to your point, Rich, the owner's last proposal would have given the players, if the postseason was played to completion, about $1.5 billion. They basically rejected this out of hand. And knowing that the commissioner could schedule 48 games in which they would get $1.2 billion. So sticking to principle here, they're willing to forego $300 million, which works out to 20% per player. So that's a virtual pay cut. So they say they don't want a second pay cut, but by allowing the commissioner to install a 48-game season, they're taking a 20% virtual pay cut. Now, it's not that simple. I understand that. They still would retain the right to file a grievance, and the damages would be just tremendous if they ever won that. So it is more complicated than that. But I think I'm using that as an example, Rich,
yes,
on how galvanized the players have been about not taking a second pay cut, because they literally are turning away $300 million to stick to their principle.
We spoke to Charlie Blackmon on May 11th, and he kind of saw this coming, to be very honest with you. He said that he didn't want the politics to get in the way. He just wants to play baseball. How many similar to Charlie could be out there right now, Tom?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think a lot. As I said, the players are more galvanized. I thought that the 2016 collective bargaining agreement, the players got what they wanted, not necessarily what they needed. They got a lot of quality of life issues in terms of, chefs in the clubhouse, extra seats on spring training buses that nobody takes, extra off days, a better travel system in terms of day games after night games. But the economic system really wasn't in their favor. There wasn't a big, huge jump in the minimum salary or especially the competitive balance tax thresholds. So I think the fact that they saw just actually a year later than that they didn't do great economically out of that CBA. I mean, that's another reason why I think they're taking a firm stand here. They found, as I said, an easy principle to defend, and that is, as their negotiator Bruce Meyer says, a day's pay for a day work, and it's very easy for them to stay together on that issue.
So, Tom Verducci here, Sports Illustrated, Fox Sports, MLB Network insider. What are the odds that all the players will say yes? Then let's go. That just tell us when and where we want to play baseball, but showing up in August and playing 2-3 months and not even knowing what the health and safety protocols are yet. I mean, what's the chance that some players that we'll see 2/3 of the Dodgers take on 1/3 of the Angels, in a freeway series?
It's a question. I think you will see some players who just have they regard it too much of a medical risk to come back, either to themselves or their families. And that's accounted for. No player should or will be forced to play if they have underlying conditions or family members who might be put at risk by the husband or son or whoever it may be going out and playing baseball under these protocols. So those players wouldn't get paid, but they would still get service time. Now, if you opt not to play and you don't fall under the category of some kind of medical risk, then you would not get pay and you would not get service time. That's a huge deal to not get service time because pay is generally tied to service time, right? You qualify for arbitration, for free agency based on service time. A couple other things to me on that, Rich. You're also defying your teammates because the majority of players want to play. This is what they do. It's very finite careers. They might not like how they got to a 48-game season, but they want to play baseball. And there's so much, I'll call it peer pressure, but clubhouse influence, that your buds are there playing ball and training for a season and you don't want to come back because you think the season's not worth it because it's not long enough. That's a tough position to defend to your teammates, forget publicly. But I also think the message you send to fans is you as a player regard this season as so insignificant, it's not worth your while to play. Why, as a fan, should I then care myself about it if you don't care enough to play? So I understand there's thought that it's not a legitimate season. It's too short to really have meaning. Why would players want to play? Bottom line is, man, they're baseball players. This is what they do for a living. You can't get these games back. Once they're gone, they're gone.
Well, I mean, the commissioner's going to be on ESPN tonight as part of a 2-hour show where all the major North American sports commissioners are scheduled to participate. What do you think Manfred's going to be able to say tonight?
Well, I think he's going to defend his last proposal. He'll mention that each proposal that they've made has moved closer to the player side, which factually is correct. I would argue that a lot of it is just incremental, and clearly it hasn't moved the players at all to the point of wanting to compromise. But I think it'll be apparent that he's dealing with a union that historically has been much stronger than the unions we see in other sports. And the other thing we're starting to see is this play out so much more publicly in baseball than in the other sports. Every sport right now is doing whatever they can to kind of in an ad hoc way decide how we can get the sport back in front of people, right? The return to play issue, no, we've never been through this before. We've been through that after lockouts or strikes, but through a pandemic, there's no playbook. Every commissioner is going through this. The baseball commissioner is the one who, unfortunately for baseball, is going through this in a very public way. The ups and the downs, one day there's hope, the next day, well, I'll say most days, there's no hope. So I think that's an element to negotiations that baseball, and listen, they're as guilty as anybody of creating some of this themselves, but with their leaks. But it does hamper negotiations when they're being done so publicly, and we don't hear about that in other sports.
Before I let you go, Tom Verducci, I guess bring attention to another piece of ESPN programming. Do you check out the 30 for 30 romp through 1998 on Sunday night? Did you check out any of that?
I did not see it, Rich. Obviously, I was embedded deeply
yes, you were.
In that season and all throughout. But, I've seen a lot of the criticisms of it. If you're going to run B-roll from 2019 when you're doing a doc on 1998, you lose a lot of credibility. It's kind of like for me as a journalist, if you're writing a story and you spell a name wrong or you get a fact wrong, people tend to look at the whole thing askew. The whole product tends to get tainted. So those are, I call them mistakes, but editorial choices, I guess, that cast doubt on it. That's what I've seen so far. I will check it out at some point. I just didn't see it last night.
So then what is your takeaway from the 1998 season? Because a lot of the criticism last night, I missed it too, to be honest with you, was a sort of a hagiography of 98, not really delving too deep into what was potentially going on at the time. They did get into it in the aftermath, but I'm just wondering what you thought the story of 1998 really is.
Well, I do think when we were in the middle of it, it was incredible, and it was fun, and it was fascinating, and I think there was always, at least in my mind, a little bit of skepticism about how this was being done. I tell people all the time, I sat across from Mark and, before the 1998 season began at his home in Orange County. And I asked him point blank about using steroids. Of course, he denied it, but it wasn't like the issue wasn't there at all in 98 and we were ignorant to it. But, what was happening in front of us on the baseball field, the ballpark's opening up early for batting practice and having a lot of people show up to watch the guys take BP.
Mm-hmm.
It was, front and center on the nightly news back when people watched the nightly news, right, on the major networks. Baseball was on the nightly news every night. Either one hit a home run. So, going through it was exciting and it was fun. I mean, there was a lot of archaeology that still had to be done with how they got to where they were. But in the moment, you can't disregard the fact that it was a fun ride.
I've been to that same house in Orange County, Tom, and I've asked the same question of Mark, too. And Mark's one of my favorite people I've ever met in this business. I mean,
that's a great guy.
I'm honestly one of the shot that I did see last night from the documentary that you saw from after he hit his 60-second home run. The two people he's hugging is his ex-wife and his ex-wife's new husband. I mean, it really was a unique setup, and his son was there, and they were all traveling around as he was trying to break the record, and then he finally did. He did it actually pretty fast, and he didn't. That could have been like a week, 10-day long journey, waiting for that home run to hit. And then, I asked him point blank on camera for ESPN2 as well, not ESPN2, but ESPN after he retired. When I received a fax from him to announce his retirement, which Tony La Russa to this day still holds against me.
It's all your fault.
Right, and that I sat across from him. Did you take steroid? And he just flat out said no, and it's just disappointing. It's like the whole "say it ain't so" from the original Natural, the book. It really is something to revisit again. But at the time, you're right. Like, nobody had their heads in the sand. But at the time, it was remarkable. It was one of the most remarkable things I've ever had a front row seat for. Tom.
Yeah, and I say this as part of the media here. As you know, Rich, a lot of people have said that people look the other way, quote unquote. We didn't. Like you, we were asking the questions. I thought in a lot of ways we were very responsible by not just accusing people of doing something that we didn't have evidence of. And again, not looking the other way because we wanted to protect baseball in any way, but just being a journalist that you don't call out someone's authenticity and their reputation just on a rumor or a whim. You need evidence, and the fact that, we withheld those suspicions, I think, until we were able to confirm a lot of these things, I think was the right thing to do. In no way was it, we're just going to look the other way because it was so much fun. I think we were able to hold both thoughts in our heads. It was amazing to watch, but there was something that we needed to get to the bottom of.
Tom, thanks for the time. Thanks for the call. We'll chat again real soon once we know what we've got here for 2020.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rich.
You got it. Tom Verducci here on the Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.